Hello, everyone. I see we have folks joining us. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to get started here in just a moment. Welcome to the Financial Aid 101 presentation. We still have some friends joining us. Give us just a moment here. All right. So good morning. Happy Tuesday. My name is Jamie Masters. I'm a financial aid advisor, and I work at Bowling Green State University, but I'm here on the behalf of OASFA, so the Ohio Association for Student Financial Aid Administrators. And we have this wonderful Financial Aid 101 presentation. And so we have a lot of resources on our website, and we want to direct you all to that. And there's going to be slides that reference that throughout the presentation, but this is an intro level presentation. Okay, so we're going to kick things off. And we may have some more friends joining us, but this is a recording, so you'll be able to access this at a later time as well. We'll put on our website, the owasfa.org website. All right. Okay, so about OASFA and this presentation. So this is sponsored by the Ohio Association for Student Financial Aid Administrators. We're a nonprofit. We're always here to help, but we're all volunteer professionals. And so just know that there is a committee that does outreach, and that is the group that put this presentation together. And we are here to serve you, okay? We have a lot of resources, like I mentioned, on our website. But realistically, everything that we're sharing is correct as of today with this Financial Aid 101. And we all know that sometimes things change. And so please bear with us. We will try to keep information as up to date as we can, especially through our listserv. And we'll mention that too at the end of the presentation, where you can get those notifications and reminders of other events that are happening through the association. But just know that we're here to serve everyone. And so that's from high school counselors to access advisors to other financial aid professionals, okay? And so anybody and everyone is welcome through the OASFA Association, and we just are so happy that you're here joining us today. So this is a free service to you, this presentation, and we will put the recording on our website. You'll also have the ability to download the slide deck that we're using with the PowerPoint. And so we just ask that if you use this resource, you don't charge anybody for it. You can share it to the families and the students that you serve. But we ask that if you are looking to distribute this information in any other way, shape, or form, that you just ask for permission. And you can reach out to our outreach@owasfa.org email, and we will get back to you to say, hey, you know, this is why we use it. This is what you can do or what you can't. But we just ask that if you do copy or distribute these materials, you don't charge anybody. But if you're looking to use this in other ways, please just ask us, and we can talk through that. Okay. And one thing that we are offering too is I have some professionals, as you can see, that are here to support you, and they're moderating this session. And so if you have questions that pop up, please put them in the Q&A section. We ask that you don't put them in the chat. We ask that you utilize the Q&A. There's an icon there that you can click on. And our wonderful support staff and moderators here, we have Jackie, Emily, and Suzanne. We'll go on there and answer your questions. We also have Morley that's logged in under our OASFA login, okay? Now, if you're having any tech issues, please just go ahead and use that chat feature for that. But anything regarding questions or comments, you can put them in that Q&A section. So I'm going to actually minimize this so that you can see the words. Okay, I'm trying to see if I can still show myself. Give me 1 second. Please bear with me. One moment. All right. Okay, I don't want the words to be covered up, okay? And so I'm going to try to move this over as much as I can, or maybe down here. There we go. There we go on the bottom. All right, so Financial Aid 101. So this draws on information from the association, also the National Association, so not just from the state of Ohio, and the Federal Student Aid through the U.S. Department of Education, right? And so this webinar is introductory, like I mentioned, but if you're looking for more in-depth information, we are encouraging you to attend one of our counselor workshops that we have coming throughout the months of October and November. They're all across the state. You know, we've been strategic with the locations that we've selected. We ask that you please attend one of those, and I'll talk more about that at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. The topics that I'm going to cover today, we're going to talk about the FAFSA, that free application for federal student aid. We're going to talk about how students and families can create an FSA ID, which is their login for that FAFSA form. We're going to talk about the different types of financial aid. Someone will ask for resources, and then there'll be a Q&A session at the end for you all. So let's go over some basic information. Okay, the federal government looks to both the student and the family to cover educational expenses. It's designed to help everybody, regardless of anyone's financial situation. And that free application for federal student aid is encouraged, but not required. It is an annual form. But that's where we determine the student's aid eligibility, okay? And when I say we, like that's institutional aid, and that's also federal and state aid. Not all institutional aid, but some. Let me just reference that. All right, so the FAFSA form. So this is an application, right? Students have to go to studentaid.gov and they have to create an account first. And I'll talk about that in just a second, how they do that with their FSA ID. But ideally, they submit an application every single year, and it calls on tax information from 2 years prior. So for the 2025-2026 FAFSA form, it's going to ask for 2023 tax information, always 2 years prior. And this application helps determine if students can get some federal or state grants, if they're eligible for work study, if they're eligible for federal direct student loans, what kind of federal direct student loans really. And for some schools, like I mentioned before, it also helps determine what type of institutional scholarships and grant funding they may receive from that specific college or university. Okay, so the information provided, there's some demographic information, student and parent. If the student is a dependent student, they're going to be required to put their parents on the FAFSA form. And it looks at taxable, untaxable income, asset information. A lot of things go into the calculation for that student aid index that the schools receive to determine the aid eligibility. So the 2025-2026 FAFSA, the thing you've all been waiting for, will open on or before December 1st, 2024. Okay, and so we don't know exactly when. This is what we're being told by the U.S. Department of Education. It should be on or before December 1. Now we're thinking probably by December 1st. That's what we know right now. Okay, so that's why it's so important on this presentation you understand that things potentially will change. But there are beta tests happening right now, and there's partnerships across the country where students are being supported to go ahead and start submitting their FAFSA forms. This is a selective process, and so not everybody has access to do this right now. But basically, the government has said, hey, we're going to try to test this out in waves so that once December 1 comes, everybody will then have access to go ahead and submit their FAFSA form. Okay, so we want folks to be mindful of what's called priority deadlines. Essentially, schools will ask that students that are applying to their institutions submit their FAFSA by a specific date. And that basically just helps determine, one, we keep them on track so that we can still send out all the financial aid offers in a timely manner. But two, it maximizes potentially the eligibility from an aid perspective that a student can receive. Because sometimes schools are limited with funding that they receive from the government on certain types of financial aid awards. So that priority deadline is important. And we would encourage all students to reach out to the institutions that they're looking at to see what those priority deadlines are. Now, FAFSA completion events are just like they sound. Schools or any of you may host some completion events where you ask for support from us financial aid administrators to come and help you have students complete the FAFSA form. And so these traditionally are on site across the state where we as financial aid advisors will be in person to assist students to getting their FAFSA completed and submitted fully, okay? Traditionally, these happen after the FAFSA opens. That's why you see the language we have on this slide is mid-December to early January, just because based on that by December 1st deadline, we're projecting that probably mid-December, maybe even January, might be a better time for us to plan to go on site to actually assist families and students with completing their FAFSA form. So what does this mean? This creates a condensed time frame. Similarly to last year, right, with that complete overhaul that we had the first time in 40 years where the FAFSA was revamped, this means that we're going to be all in this together. We're going to be working diligently to make sure that students are not behind, that we keep them ahead. We are there to support them, but obviously it's going to create a smaller window of time, potentially based on the priority deadlines that schools have to get that FAFSA completed. And so that means schools are going to be reviewing those submission summaries, the student aid index, if we have students that are selected for verification. And obviously when we want to send out those aid offers, so the review for that is going to be a shorter window too, just like it was last year. And so we ask that you stay up to date, you stay, on our listserv. You reach out if you have any additional questions. We're obviously here to support you all. We're going to be in this together. But just know we are looking ahead thinking that we will be on a condensed timeline once again this year because of the delay with the opening of the FAFSA form. One other thing I want to mention, obviously when students go in to complete the 2025-2026 FAFSA form, the 2024-2025 FAFSA form will still be open. Okay, and so make sure when you're supporting students and families that they go in and do the 2025-2026 FAFSA form, okay? Because that's the one that schools are going to want for the fall 25, spring 26 semester. So what can parents and students do right now? They can create that log and that FSA ID, and they can do that today. We would strongly encourage all folks to go ahead and start making those accounts. Sometimes that's the most tedious part of the whole process, is just setting up that initial login. So we ask that families and students do this before they officially go in to complete the FAFSA form. And why do we do that? Because it just takes some time. One, we don't want folks to feel rushed, but two, the biggest thing is that their information has to link with the Social Security Administration, and that only takes a few business days once that initial account has been created. And so we do support students that come in and they complete the FSA ID the same time they're going to go ahead and do the 25-26 FAFSA form, but they're going to have to manually input a lot of that information if they already don't have an FSA ID on record. Okay, and so once again, that linking time frame sometimes can take a few days, okay, for everything to kind of pull in and basically be pulled in from the IRS, okay? And so it's going to be a manual, an override regardless with that DDX tool where it pulls in the tax information for the family and the student. But just know when they create that account beforehand, it saves a lot of trouble, and it honestly will go faster when they go to the completion event or they do it at home. So how do they create an account? They go to studentaid.gov. That's the main place that they're going to complete the FAFSA form. That's also where they initiate and create that FSA ID. Now, each individual needs to create their own login or FSA ID. So when they go to studentaid.gov, in the top right, there's a create an account button. They're going to enter their login information, their personal information, basically just follow the steps, right? The mailing address, email, phone, their language preference, challenge questions, things like that. The main tips that we want to make sure that you all have an awareness of, every time someone goes in to create an account, they have to have a unique phone number. They're going to put in their social security number. They have to have a unique email. Each individual person that creates an FSA ID cannot have an email that's being shared with another user. And so it's really important, especially when the student goes in, that they don't take their parents' email and that they don't use their high school email, because they're going to have access to this for the next 8 to 10 years potentially, right? Because this is their main login. It's tied to their social security number. And it's important that they take their time. They're aware of what their legal name is, that date of birth, and how it's listed on their social security card. Okay, because any type of mix up, one number off, extra space here or there is going to mess up that link with the Social Security Administration. And so we ask that people do not rush this process, but they take their time and they really think through, okay, this is my unique information. I'm saving my information in a secure location. Okay, we ask that both parents create an FSA ID as well, because every single individual that's going to go in and give that consent to have their information pulled to be used by the form has to have their own account on file. Okay, and they're not sharing this information. Obviously, this is confidential information for each individual, but it's important that they keep track of that. So expected family contribution and student aid index. And so before this revamp, the index number that schools utilize to determine aid eligibility for each student was called the expected family contribution number. Okay, it always was an index number, so it got changed. The name got revamped with the new launch last year, and now it's called the student aid index. Okay, so this is what colleges and universities use to determine, once again, the aid eligibility for each individual student. The results calculated from information are provided on the FAFSA form. Okay, so everything that is inputted into that form is put into that calculation. It spits out the student aid index number. Now, that's the same number that's sent to every single school that is listed on the FAFSA form. Now, remember, students can list up to 20 institutions on the FAFSA. It used to be 10, now it's 20, and the order does not matter. But just have an awareness that that student index is the same. It's constant. So that's the same number that's sent to each school that they have listed on their FAFSA form. And it's not the amount of money that's owed to the college or the university, okay? This is based on the ability to pay for college, not the willingness, right? And once again, the factors that determine are basically everything under the sun that's inputted into the student aid, or excuse me, into the FAFSA form. So family size, student and contributor taxable untaxed income, right? Cash savings, checking balances, asset information. There's a lot of questions on the FAFSA form, but just know that most of the information that they're filling out in that form is going to be used into that student aid index calculation. So consent, I already mentioned this a little bit, but every person that goes in to contribute to the FAFSA form will be required to provide consent. Now, this consent allows the IRS to pull information, okay? And it's through like a DDX feature on the website, but basically it helps make the process go a lot faster. So it's important that, everybody gives consent, because if consent is not given, okay, then there's no student aid index number that can be calculated, meaning no federal aid eligibility. Okay, so schools potentially will still receive the completed FAFSA form, but if there's individuals that are missing with giving the consent on the FAFSA, it'll show up as rejected on our end. Okay, and so people will have to go back in and get that consent before a student aid index number can be calculated. And this does include non-filers, so this is people without social security numbers, foreign tax filers, etc. So let's talk a little bit about dependency status. And this essentially is a term that's used when students are trying to determine, how do I file this FAFSA form? Okay, there's two main avenues that students potentially could be eligible for with filing the FAFSA form. And this basically outlines that there's dependent students that are required to have their parents listed on their FAFSA form, or independent students that are not required to have parental information on the FAFSA form. So there's limited reasons, though, as to why students would not be required to have their parents listed. And they are listed on this slide. So if they're born before January 1st, 2002, they're 24 years or older, automatic independent, does not have to provide parental information. If they're married, automatic independent. If they're pursuing a master's or doctoral program, automatic independent. If they have children or dependents other than the spouse that receive more than half of their support from the student, automatic independent. Since turning 13, were they orphan, ward of the court, or in foster care? Independent. Are they legally emancipated minor? Independent. Was or in a legal guardianship by someone other than the parent? Independent. Okay. Student is unaccompanied and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk of homelessness? Independent. And currently serving in the U.S. Armed Forces other than training or veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? Independent. Now, with this, when students get each of these questions individually on the FAFSA form, okay, because it's going to be under that dependency status umbrella, schools still potentially have to clarify and gather supporting documentation depending on what they select. Okay, so it's going to clearly list out all of these things for students to determine, do I qualify as being an independent where I don't have to provide parental information? And depending on what they select, schools that the FAFSA is sent to will then reach out to confirm that status. Now, there's something called unusual circumstances, meaning like, I still think that I'm independent, even though none of those automatic type of independent questions apply to me. But could I still potentially pursue and explain my circumstance so that I could be an independent student? Now, when this happens, it depends on the circumstance, and each individual school has an appeal process called a dependency appeal, okay? And so every school that the student is sending their FAFSA to, the school will then have a process for the student to basically outline, this is what I'm going through, this is my circumstance, and the individual school will tell them if they can override and basically make them an independent student. So what types of reasons potentially would fall under unusual circumstances? This would be like if they have no contact with their parents, or there's something preventing them from contacting their parents, and this would pose a risk to the student, okay? So if they left home due to an abusive or threatening environment, were they abandoned, or are they estranged by their parents? Are they a refugee or asylee status and are separate from their parents, or their parents are displaced in a foreign country? Are they a victim of human trafficking? Are the parents incarcerated? Okay, like there's limited reasons, but depending on what the student is going through, if they don't have a relationship with said parents, okay, there's no contact and there's a specific reason, we would encourage the student to reach out to the schools that they are looking at, and the schools will reach out to them too, right? Because they can still submit their FAFSA and identify, like, I have other circumstances, right? And we are required to then say, hey, what's going on, and support them in this dependency process to see if they would be eligible. Now with this, It's not necessarily automatic, okay? Schools each have a separate process, and they may ask for different types of supporting documentation, okay? And then there's something called special circumstances, a little bit different than unusual circumstances, okay? And so this type of thing is when schools can go in and make an adjustment to like the COA with like the cost of attendance or that student aid index number, okay? So maybe there's been a loss or a change of job, a reduction of pay, a divorce in the household, a parent passed away, unexpected medical expenses or things that are creating financial hardship currently for the family or the household. Okay. And they're not necessarily documented through the FAFSA data that's shown, right? Because the FAFSA data utilizes information from 2 years prior. And so people will still go in, students and families will still go in and submit the FAFSA, and then they should contact the institutions that they're looking at and the FAFSA was sent to see, okay, is there a special circumstance or special consideration process where I can appeal to make a change to what I submitted originally? And schools are required to have this, okay, based on a special circumstance. And a lot of times they're going to ask for supporting documentation or written explanation. They potentially will have a separate application that families or students have to fill out. And if approved, based on the documentation that is submitted, then the aid office can go and make an adjustment to the student aid index or the cost of attendance based on that special circumstances. Now, once a decision's been made, there's no appeal process after the fact, because this process is housed by each individual institution. It's through a professional judgment they make. And so nobody can appeal this through like the U.S. Department of Education. This is kind of locked in based on that specific institution and the circumstance. Now, the institution can determine the time frame that they look at when they make this change to the student aid index, right? Like they could be doing it in real time. They could be looking at 2025 income or information with the medical expenses or things that are submitted, or they could be looking at 2024, which is the year prior, but it's not the 2 years prior with the 2023 information. But regardless, if something has changed since the FAFSA has been submitted, and once again, it used information from 2023, schools will then determine, okay, what would we need to go in and make this adjustment? And they'll let you know based on the adjustment if it makes a significant amount of impact in regards to the aid eligibility. Because sometimes when that student aid index drops, it then puts the student in range for additional federal and state aid. And once again, these are the reasons why folks would submit the special circumstance or consideration appeal through each individual school. And I mentioned these, loss of employment, divorce, child support change, extraordinary dependent care. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. And once again, it's up to each individual school to determine the process they have in place, the time frame they do to kind of gather up all of that information, as well as the judgment that they make, okay? Because each individual school is going to be using their own professional judgment to make the adjustment. So after the FAFSA is submitted, okay, we remind students to check their emails, okay? We remind them to look at their FAFSA submission summary. This used to be called the Student Aid Report. This is where they can look at an overview of all the information that was inputted into the FAFSA. Then they'll start to receive their award offers from institutions, right? Now, this depends on the school and kind of where they're at with processing those. This would be a great question for students to ask the institutions that are really at the top of their list, like, hey, when can I expect to get my aid offer and my award offer from you? Because it will vary. Okay. And the other thing too is that priority deadline. I just want to keep harping on that. When is your priority deadline and when can I expect to get my award offers from you? And is my award offer going to come via mail? Am I going to get a text? Do I need to check my email through the school? Try to ask them to be detailed when they request an information of where and how can I find it and how quickly can you get it to me? So that it helps them make their decision, right? It's important information as they go through this process. And we always encourage students to continue to look for scholarship funding even after they submit their FAFSA. And they'll continue on with other processes potentially for institutional aid. And so that's another thing they want to be asking either the financial aid office or the admissions office, the institutions they're looking at, like, hey, what other opportunities can I continue to pursue even after I submit my FAFSA? And is there a priority deadline for these other opportunities institutionally at your school? So what is the cost of attendance, or COA for short? It's everything under the sun that it would take to go to an institution of higher learning, right? So the cost, we're looking at the cost, whether it be indirect or direct costs. So tuition and fees, housing and food, living expenses, whether it be on or off campus, books, course materials, supplies, transportation, miscellaneous and personal expenses like loan fees, things like that. everything that it could take to go to an institution of higher learning. Now, institutions are required. We have federal guidelines. We have to give an overview of the cost of attendance. Every single student is going to have an estimate for their COA. And when we share out our award offers, the cost of attendance information should be included. And honestly, students should have access to this even prior to receiving that official award offer, okay? At least an estimate, right? And so it's important that students pay attention to this, right? Because realistically, once again, there are direct costs, meaning what am I going to owe the university directly versus indirect costs that are estimates of other expenses I could have on my own that I would still potentially need to have to go to school, but I'm not paying the university directly or the college directly, okay? And so sometimes the COA can seem a little high, right? But realistically, it should be broken up in a way, hopefully, where students can basically make meaning of what am I gonna have to pay and when directly to the university, and then what other things should I be planning for that could be an indirect cost that I could incur during my time at your school, right? And every year that students file their FAFSA, we're going to send out updated award summaries potentially for that next academic year, but we're also going to once again continue to include the cost of attendance information. So every year they're going to receive an estimate with what it could take to go to school. So need comparison. Why is this important? Because as you can see, there's institutions that may be a little more expensive than others, right? A higher cost institution, mid cost, or lower cost institution. The cost of attendance is going to look different, right? Depending on the type of institution the student may be looking at and considering. But once again, that student aid index number is going to always be constant. It's going to be the same at every single school. And so their need eligibility and eligibility for what they potentially will need from a financial aid perspective will shift depending on how much each individual institution costs. And so those award summaries also are going to come and they're going to look different. They're going to vary. So please encourage students or all of you as professionals to reach out to financial aid administrators to help make meaning of those because their need and eligibility is going to look different from school type to school type and even public to public or private to private. Okay. So now let's talk about the different sources of financial aid, okay? Now, the different sources of financial aid, right? And I've already mentioned a lot of these, right? So federal government has different types of financial aid, states, college and universities, there's private sources, employers, all right? So we're gonna kind of cover these a little bit here moving forward. So there's something called self-help aid. All right, so this is loans or like employment. And we mentioned work study because that is one of the types of financial aid offers that a student can receive tied to the FAFSA data that's submitted. Not everybody's eligible. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But self-help aid is like loans are borrowed. These have to be paid back. Employment is earned through having a job. So self-help aid. And then there's something called gift aid. Okay, free money, scholarships, free money traditionally do not have to be paid back. Grants, free money traditionally do not have to be paid back. So a lot of times, these can be a little confusing because we use so many amazing terms in financial aid. But gift aid is really like what is free that I potentially do not have to ever pay back. Whereas self-help aid is what is borrowed or something I have to earn in order to receive this financial aid offer. Okay. So there's a lot of different types of federal student aid programs, and I'm gonna touch base on these 7 coming up in the next few slides. So let's kick things off with the federal Pell Grant or the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. Both of these are federal grants. Notice the Pell Grant, the award maximum is up to $7,395 for the 24-25 aid year. Okay, this is a need-based grant. There are multiple different ways that students can potentially, be eligible for the federal Pell Grant. With the complete overhaul, there was a good shift, okay, expanded eligibility for more students to potentially receive the federal Pell Grant, but there's a minimum, maximum, and calculated Pell, okay, and it goes based on enrollment intensity. So in the past, for folks that have been in financial aid or aware of a lot of these types of awards before, there used to be a chart, okay, this expected family contribution number and this many credits. Students in range, this is what they're getting. Okay, there's no chart anymore. It's a calculated type of Pell or minimum max automatic. We're looking at the federal poverty thresholds. We're looking at the student index. Okay, so there's different ways, once again, expanded eligibility. Okay, so that more students potentially can receive it, but it's not as like automatic. This is what you get because of this EFC. in this many credits, okay? And once again, it's by enrollment intensity. So based on the amount of credits that students are taking, determine also by each individual credit, depending on what their student aid index number and their poverty level threshold is, to determine if they can get any of that federal Pell or not, okay? Now, students can continue to submit the FAFSA even after the priority deadline. I don't want you all to think that like once school has their priority deadline, like, oh, now I can't submit my FAFSA. No, I am still processing FAFSAs for students that are currently admitted at BG this fall semester, okay? So they can continue to submit their FAFSA form. However, with the federal Pell, anytime they submit, if they're in range, they're going to get that depending on how many credits they potentially are taking, right? Now, the difference, though, is there are other types of grants, like the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity grants, that we have a set pot of money, okay? Schools are given this from the U.S. Department of Education, and we go based on priority deadline, which is why that's so important, okay? Because we don't always have enough to give to every single student that is potentially eligible. And so they have to demonstrate exceptional financial need to be considered for the SEOG grant, awarded first to students with the lowest student aid index number, okay? And Pell eligible students are a priority for SEOG. And the awards can range from $100 to $4,000, depending on institutional type and how they determine how much they want to give to each individual student. But once again, there's not enough always to give to students that are eligible. And so we go based on the priority deadline to determine who in that given year could receive it, because sometimes students may not get it their first year, but they could get it their second year. But we always encourage everybody to submit their FAFSA early to maximize the opportunity to be considered for the SEOG grant. But once again, the Pell, whenever they submit the FAFSA, if they're in range, they can receive it. But SEOG is a little bit different. It's a campus-based program. Institutions determine based on the pot of money they have, how they award that and how much they give each student. But once again, it's awarded first to students with the lowest student aid index number. The students of high financial need are priority for that. So the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, or IASG, this is a non-need-based grant. It's available to students whose parent guardian died as a result of U.S. military service on or after 9/11, 2001. At time of parent death, student must have been less than 24 years of age, or if age 24 or older, must have been enrolled at higher education institution. And they do not have to be Pell eligible. Student must not be Pell eligible to be considered for the IASG grant. Let's talk a little bit about the TEACH grant. I go back and forth with this one because for folks that are aware, this is a grant to start. It is specific to education majors. Now, not every education major is eligible, and there is a list online at studentaid.gov where individuals can research this a little bit more to determine, does my type of major fall under the TEACH grant eligibility, because it is specific to certain majors for eligibility. Now, the big thing with this, if a student is eligible, they can get up to $3,772 per year. Okay, but the biggest thing with this is that students have to agree to teach in a high need field at a school that serves low income families. This is for post-graduation, okay, in order to keep this as a grant. So they must teach at least 4 years within their first 8 years of graduation at a high needs field, in a high need field at a school that serves low income families. Otherwise, it converts to a direct unsubsidized loan. And remember, the direct unsubsidized loans start to accrue interest at the time of borrow. So it's going to backdate all of that interest back. So it seems really nice. It starts out as a grant. But if students do not abide by that, must teach at least 4 years within 8 years of graduation in a high need field at a school that serves low income families, then it's going to turn into that loan, and they're going to push back that interest back to when they took out the TEACH grant. And so err on the side of caution with this when encouraging students to take out the TEACH grant. Make sure they do their due diligence with researching this to see, is this something that they really want to pursue and kind of lock in on? Because if not, it will turn into that unsubsidized loan that they will have to pay back. Federal work study. So students, whether they be undergrad or graduate students, are eligible for this potentially. FAFSA is submitted to determine eligibility for federal work study. I shouldn't say that. That's one of the biggest change. That used to be a question on the FAFSA. Sorry, I had to stop myself. Campus leadership, essentially, in financial aid offices determine federal work study eligibility. And this is something that used to be a question, do I want to be considered? Now, when we have FAFSAs on file, we look at everybody that has one on file to determine if they're eligible, but doesn't mean everybody has to take it. So they do have to have a FAFSA on file. But this used to be something that students could opt into, like I want to be considered for federal work study. Now schools will determine how they award this. Okay, so this is for undergrad or graduate students. Employment can be on or off campus. Wages. The biggest benefit is that, you know, we file the FAFSA and it's always 2 years prior with tax information, right? But if I get an on-campus job, let's say I was offered 2,000 in work study, I earn that money through a paycheck, you know, just like any regular job on campus. Let's say every 2 weeks, students get paid at my institution. When I get that money, I can spend it on whatever I want. Okay, and so it doesn't go directly towards my bill. If I choose to make a payment with what I earn through my work study job towards potentially any type of charges that I still have listed with an account balance, I do that on my own. Okay. But the real benefit is whatever I earn in this work study, I don't have to include 2 years from now when I file my FAFSA. Okay, it's excluded from future student aid index calculation. And so the wages that I earn, that 2,000 that I earn from work study, does not have to be included on my future FAFSA as income. Now I still have to file taxes. We get that question sometimes. Yes, I do, because it was a job. But I don't have to include that it's income on my future FAFSA. And it's not inputted into that student aid index calculation. Okay. Now, the funds are limited, just like the SCOG grant. Schools get a pot of money. They determine how potentially they distribute this out. And so they go based on the priority deadline. Okay. Now, if you know a student that's like, I really wanted that work study money, encourage them to reach out to the financial aid office. We're constantly redistributing work study money because not everybody wants it that's potentially offered it. And so when students decline, we're reallocating that to other individuals. And so we're moving it around, and we could potentially reconsider that student to see if we have some funding available. Now, when we think about where can students work, I mean, traditionally, a lot of the jobs are potentially going to be on campus, okay, but also in the local community. So federal, state, or local public agencies, nonprofits, in academically relevant jobs, you know, for-profit organizations and academically relevant jobs, okay, so community service-based activities, things like that. And so really we're thinking locally, what could the student get, what type of experience could they get, but also on campus as well. So now let's talk about loans, federal direct student loans. There's two main types. Okay, there's the federal direct subsidized loan and the federal direct unsubsidized loan. Okay, now they are different. Okay, the subsidized is better. The government pays the accrued interest while the student is in school. Okay, whereas the unsubsidized loan, the borrower starts to accrue interest at the time of borrow. Okay, and so just think of it this way. The government subsidizes the interest while the student's in school. For the subsidized loan, it's not accruing. When they graduate, it starts to accrue, whereas the unsubsidized, it's always accruing. At the time of borrow, it starts to accrue. However, neither of these loans have to be paid back until 6 months post-graduation, as long as the student maintains, if they're an undergraduate student, 6 credits, okay? Or if they're a graduate student and they have an unsubsidized loan, it's 4 credits, okay? They continue that enrollment, then it's going to continue to defer the payment until 6 months post-graduation. If at any point they drop below that in a fall or spring term, then potentially they're going to be told, hey, you're using up your grace period. And then after the 6 months ends, they're going to be contacted by the loan servicer through the government to start making those payments. Now, subsidized loans are better because it's based on financial need. So that's why not every student is eligible for these types of loans, and it's really geared towards undergraduate students only. But we utilize the FAFSA data to determine who can receive subsidized loan, who can receive unsubsidized loan. Is it some in the subsidized and the rest in the unsub, or is it all in the unsubsidized, depending on the FAFSA data? Now notice that the interest rate is fixed for both. It is 6.53%. And notice that unsubsidized loans are for undergrads and graduate students. Okay, notice I mentioned that 6.53%, and then 8.08%, it goes up slightly for graduate students. Okay, so graduate students are not eligible for subsidized, once again, only unsubsidized. And we'll talk about a little bit the aggregated loan limits now as well. And so depending on the year that the student is in school will determine how much they can receive in regards to the aggregated loan limits with the direct student loans. So first year students or freshman students can receive up to $5,500, sophomores $6,500, juniors and seniors $7,500. Now, if I'm a graduate student, I submit my FAFSA, I'm going to be eligible for $20,500 in a federal direct unsubsidized loan. Once again, at that 8.08%. Now, this was the interest rates for 24-25. And so the interest rates for 2025, 2026 will change. And we are notified in the spring going into the summer term what that is. But just know the 2024-2025 interest rates were 6.53% and for undergraduate loans, and then 8.08% for the unsubsidized loan for graduate students. And once again, this goes based on the amount each year goes based on the year that they're in school, based on the credit hours they've completed, as to how much they're going to be offered each year. Okay, and notice that subsidized is capped. And so even if I'm a student of highest need, the maximum I can receive in a subsidized loan is $3,500 my first year, $4,500 my second year, $5,500 my junior and senior years. Now, we do have students that don't receive anything in the subsidized loan as an undergrad. Maybe all of it's going to be $5,500 in an unsubsidized loan, okay, or a little bit less than that, right? And maybe a little bit in sub, but a little bit, most of it in an unsub. It's all determined based on the FAFSA data. And we notify students that their award offer is what they're eligible for each year. Now, the Parent Plus loan, this is a loan in the parent's name, okay? The parent would have to go to studentaid.gov and complete a separate application outside of the FAFSA form already being on file. And the reason for that is because a credit check is required. Whereas a credit check is not required for the federal direct subsidized or unsubsidized loan. By submitting the FAFSA, students are automatically going to be offered some of those loans, okay? Whereas with the Parent Plus, have to go to studentaid.gov, a parent would apply with their FSA ID login that they created as a parent borrower, because they would be the responsible one to pay that back. Their credit check would be run. They'll know instantly based on when the application is submitted if they're going to be approved or denied. And then schools are notified within a few business days, all right, on the application. A parent can select how they want to make payments back on this loan. I'm going to move this a little bit. And essentially, they can select to do it 60 days after the loan has fully dispersed, or they can defer it until their student graduates, okay? Now, they would be working directly with a loan servicer that is assigned to them through the federal government to make those payments. Notice the interest rate is 9.08% for the 2024-2025 aid year. And this, once again, is fixed, so it's locked in for that specific aid year, but it does change from year to year. And so that is announced traditionally in the spring term. Also on the application, please note that if they apply and get denied, then depending on what year their student is in school, their student, if they're a freshman or a sophomore, could be offered an additional $4,000 in an unsubsidized loan, or if they're a junior or senior, they can be offered an additional $5,000 in an unsubsidized loan. And from that denial, the loan offer for an unsubsidized loan will be in the student's name, okay? That's only if a parent applies and gets denied that the student would then be offered the additional loan in their name for that given year. Now, there are some other Ohio-based programs that we just wanted you all to have an awareness of, but there's a lot, okay? And they are specific to certain types of student populations. And so there was actually 8 new ones this year alone. And so the Ohio Department of Education has been busy. It's been awesome. They've been increasing eligibility, especially supporting different students from across the state. But just notice that these are primarily targeted for Ohio residents. And you can learn more at highered.ohio.gov to kind of dig into these different types. Now, I want to give another plug for our counselor workshops, because that's going to be a more in-depth overview of federal and state aid programs, and we will be breaking these down in more detail. But for today's presentation, this is a general FA 101. There's so many to cover. We are going to encourage you to start researching now. Go to highered.ohio.gov, learn about these, and we will go into more detail at our counselor workshops later on. Now, scholarships, right? Scholarship searches and scams. We just want everybody to be aware. And one thing I don't think I mentioned earlier, if a student is ever being told they need to pay for the FAFSA, that free application for federal student aid, that's a scam. It's free. There's literally free in the name of FAFSA, free application. So err on the side of caution. If they ever notice anything that seems off and they're like, I don't know, like, don't give any personal or confidential information. Reach out to a financial aid administrator. We can confirm that if it legit is a scam, or we can do the best we can to research that for you to prevent other students from potentially being scammed as well. And so just have buyer beware, especially when they're also looking at scholarship search engines. A lot of scholarships are going to be free to apply. Paying a fee will probably is a scam. Okay. So more likely than not, anytime they're applying for scholarships, it should be free. All of you also have probably your databases or have resources that you're giving your students to support them with their scholarship search. Just know that we at colleges and universities also have not just scholarships tied to the university, but we should have resources for external scholarships too, that we can provide students as well that are looking for additional funding outside of the institution. So we always encourage students to also look locally, from foundations to involvements they have through their church, employers that potentially their family has or close relatives, family, friends, any financial institutions or things that, organizationally in the community potentially could could boast a nice scholarship for your student. We encourage them to apply for all the things. And once again, even after they submit their FAFSA, we encourage everybody to pursue scholarships. And their second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year in college, they're pursuing scholarships every single year. It does not end just because their first year commences, or they're like, hey, this is what I got my first year, I don't know what to do. That's why we're here. Send students our way to support them with additional scholarship searches, even after their first year in college. So I already mentioned external scholarships and the search engines. And so there are a lot of really big search engines that are going to basically match students potentially with scholarships. They're going to gather some personal information, their involvements, just demographic information, things like that, where they're going to link them with scholarships that could be more specific to the student. They can be a little overwhelming because they may take their email and they're just going to get these updates like all the time. And so a lot of them, like scholarships.com, there's a lot of great resources, or fastfood.com. But that's normal for students to input like an email and some personal information and kind of be updated as more opportunities become available. And obviously, if they have any questions, please encourage them to reach out to a financial aid administrator, and we can also support them. We're not as well versed in all the external scholarships. I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of them, but we do know some of the big ones that are not scams that we can help support students with. So let's talk about OASFA resources. We are almost at the end of our presentation here. And so one thing that some colleagues on the outreach committee worked really hard on was to gather information about those priority deadlines. And obviously we're in another year of change where we are just like rolling with what comes our way. And so we've asked leadership from institutions across the state of Ohio, like, what are you all thinking? What's your priority deadline? When do you think you're going to send out your award offers? And we gather that for you all. So please use it as a resource. It's on our WESFA website. There's a list of the institutions across the state with as much information that we could gather from them that would help you better support students that you serve as well. It's just a great tool. And obviously we gathered it like a month ago. And so some things, once again, may change. So we apologize in advance, but we did the best we could with the information we have right now so that we can give students an awareness of like, this is what we think is coming down the pipeline. Try to meet these priority deadlines so you can maximize your aid eligibility, but also this is when we're targeting to send out those aid offers so that students can have that to make their decisions, right? There may be other things that students should have an awareness of, other deadlines or things like that, early decision deadlines, transcript deadlines, verification. You may be requesting additional financial aid forms, things like that from students. And so that's why this priority deadline sheet is really helpful, especially as you as professionals that support students in the schools or in the local community. Please don't hesitate to share that with your families and students that you serve. Okay. Now we do have another resource that is hopefully going to be really helpful to everybody that's on this call. If at any point you're putting on a financial aid night and you are looking for a financial aid administrator to do the presentation, whether it be in person or virtually, we can help. We can help connect you with a financial aid administrator and across the state. We ask that you go to our website and you request a financial aid night presenter. There's a link there that goes to a form. Please do it early. Sometimes if it gets into that 2-week window, especially that 1-week window, we can't guarantee that we're going to be able to connect you because of the time frame, and everybody's going to start gearing up to get busier and busier as we get closer to December 1 with the launch. But these are geared towards general financial aid presentations. So we do not do completion events. We don't go on site and help students in person through the OASFA like service. You can obviously reach out to local institutions or colleges near you that can help you with doing those completion events, because we're still going to be doing them. But this purpose of the resource on our OASFA website is to assist people with financial aid presentations. That goes over a lot of this like general FA 101 presentation information that I've been sharing today. So please utilize this, and we will do the best we can to connect you with somebody across the state. We have a big database, and so that's why we're here to support you, to make sure that you have what you need to help your students be successful. We have these counselor workshops, and this is so exciting because we really do pride ourselves on trying to give as much information as we can so that you all can do what you need to do to support your students. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on are these counselor workshops. Notice that there are a lot of locations across the state, and that was strategic because we know that we don't want people traveling too far. And so they start soon though. The first one is October 11th. Okay, we have a lot in October and a lot in November. Notice that there is one virtual option over Zoom that's going to be offered, our last one, on Monday, November 25th. You can sign up for these on our website at owasfa.org through resources and under the counselor area. Now these all are in person and they go from 9 to noon, except for that last virtual counselor workshop. Okay, that's going to be over Zoom, and it will be later in the day, I believe from 1 to 3 p.m. on the 25th. So it's going to be a little bit shorter of a window, but still going to be covering all of the amazing information. Okay. And so registration is required, it's requested, because we want to make sure, you know, that we have enough space for everybody that wants to come on these specific days. And so even if your whole team or the staff that you work with can't attend, maybe just sending one of you, because especially as we're rolling through a lot of these changes that potentially are going to continue to come down the pipeline, it's just as important this year as it was last year to be attending these workshops, because this is going to give you the most in-depth overview of everything that we can share with you at this time, whether it be through for FAFSA form, federal, state aid programs, everything under the sun. We're going to do the best we can to share that information with you. And it's just good camaraderie, good networking. You're going to be linking up with some local financial aid administrators from your area that can continue to support you even after the workshop, right? If you have additional questions, it's just an opportunity to meet somebody that works professionally in this sphere that can give you up-to-date information if you have additional questions, or if you're looking once again to help students and you have specific detailed things that pop up later down the road, you have that contact as well. So we do have an email if you have any additional questions. It's outreach@owasfa.org. We have our wonderful website that is full of tons of great resources at owasfa.org. This is where you can once again request that high school financial aid night presenter, request to go and register for the council workshop. We have a listserv where we'll send you updates and reminders about other events that are coming up. We'll have a recording actually that's going to be a financial aid presentation that you can share out with your families and students as well. If folks are not able to do a virtual or in-person financial aid night, our recording is going to cover all the same information, okay? And so that would be another tangible resource that you could even post on your website or things to support your students, or once again, just share it once you get one-off questions from students about things, okay? So that is the presentation. I know that's a lot. I do talk fast, so my apologies, but this is a time now for all of you to ask any questions or other comments or things. Please use that Q&A. And I'm going to move this up and refer to some of my colleagues because I can't see the chat, unfortunately. I know some things are happening in there if others potentially could chime in on their end as well.
Hi, Jamie, it's Jackie.
Yeah.
Couple questions. One went into chat, but it was where would they find the updated FAFSA priority deadline sheet?
Yeah, it's under counselor resources on our website at owasfa.org.
And also a question about are we emailing a certificate of attendance?
For this, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Morally?
Yes.
Yeah.
The answer is
Yes.
yes. What you have to do is send an email to outreach@oasfa.org and request a certificate of attendance for the webinar, and we will send the certificate if you need this, if you need that for certificate renewal or something like that.
Thank you. We can wait a minute or two to see if you all have any additional questions. I'll lean on my colleagues that are working that chat. Q&A, excuse me, not the chat.
Yeah, Jamie, at this point, there aren't any additional questions, so I think we can wrap up and thank people for attending.
Yes, thank you all so much. We really appreciate everything that you do day in and day out. You know, I can't say it enough. Like we are in this together. So please, please do not hesitate to reach out, especially if you need additional assistance finding that presenter, or you're looking for more in-depth information about something in particular, about a specific type of aid program, whether it be federal or state aid. We can definitely support you. So reach out to our outreach at owasfa.org email. We are definitely here to assist. So we hope you all have a great rest of your day. We hope that you sign up to attend one of our counselor workshops, and we'd love to see you all at our future events. So, and I'm going to turn it over to Morley or Suzanne. Is there anything else that I should check? I should say? Yeah.
There was another question in the Q&A, just to repeat that answer about how to get their certificate of attendance.
So they,
Yes,
go ahead,
yes,
Morley.
just go ahead and send an email to outreach@OASFA, OASFAA.org and request a certificate of attendance. Also, one additional question popped in about, will the PowerPoint be posted on the website? The answer to that question is yes, it should be up and posted later today. We also will within the next couple days, repost a link to the recording of the webinar today. So you will be able to find these resources on the OASFA Counselor Resource page.
Well, thank you all so much. We're going to close out here then. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and take care. Thanks so much.